as you know, Bang Shiyuk was actually called in for a second questioning by the police, and the first one lasted for 14 hours, and they want him the second time. Okay, so as I kept on mentioning to everybody, this is the entire reason he came back. This is why he came back. Bang Shiyuk specifically said that he is going to cooperate. He's going to go whenever they call him. That is the whole reason he left his business to somebody else in the US and Latin America and Japan and all over the world, just so he could attend to all of these hearings. So he's doing that. He's attending all of it. So he was called in for the second time. And I think you cannot deny this. That last week, one of the funniest things that ever happened that came out of this thing was this statement from Min Hee Jin, from Min. She said that Bang Shiyuk told me there was no plan for an IPO. So she provided an interview right after the 14-hour questioning of Bang Shiyuk the first time. She provided reporters an interview. And she said that Bang Shiyuk actually promised her that there was not going to be an IPO, and that's why her bonus was actually converted, was instead came in cash. So that was what she signed for. It was cash instead of shares, because Bang Shiyuk said there is no plan for an IPO. Okay, and she said a lot of things to the reporters. Now, it was so funny. The legal team was like, "Well, I'm not really sure if they spoke, but thanks to her for confirming what we have been saying all the time." And I thought it was the funniest thing that ever. It was like, "Way to go, way to go." Well played, well played. Don't you think? It was well played. When I heard their response, I was like, well played, well played. If I been in her situation, I would have probably just said, okay, well played, well played. You got that one. So it was funny. We don't know if they actually spoke, but thanks to her for confirming what we have been saying. So, okay. It was absolutely hilarious. This was like one of the funniest things I've ever heard. It really made my day. Okay. So, why was he called in for the second hearing, for the second questioning? There's a lot of reasons. People asked me this. Why was he actually called for the hearing for a second time for round two of questioning? There's several reasons. It could be all of this. It could be one of this. It could be a combination of different ones. But one is to clarify contradictions if they found that their banks actually saying something that contradicts their documents or contradicts other statement that he actually said, then they will call him again just to clarify things and finalize things. It could also be that they secured something new, like the statement of Min Hee Jin. If after providing statement to the police, she formally submitted an evidence to the police, and sorry, after providing their statement to the reporters, she actually provided something to the police and it's something new. He could have been called in relation to that, or just other new evidence of some sort. Okay, so we don't know. Next is that it could be testimonies, witness testimonies. If there are people who came forward and provided new information, they have a new witness, someone said that she or he knows something, then they could ask him to clarify those points. Okay. This is probably the most important, and a lot of like lawyers are saying that this could be it. There has to be a proper assessment of intent versus negligence. So, in a crime, as you know, one thing could actually lead from the difference between a homicide and an actual murder, and that is intent. If there was an intent to murder, to kill, then that is murder. If there is no intent, then that could be homicide. So the same thing is true in a financial case like this. Did they intend to lie to the investors, or that they were just negligent? Okay, so that could be it. There's trying to establish which of the two. Okay. Um Police has been given excessive power to investigate now. It actually took power from the prosecutor's office. Under table money is always in play. I will clarify this as well in a bit. Okay. So, and then the other is that they are probably preparing as well to forward the case for, to refer it to the prosecution. So they just want to make sure that everything that they have is airtight, because after they put this on the hands of the prosecutor's office, it's hands off for them anymore. And the prosecutor's office will have no choice but to review the case in the merits of what was submitted to them. So they just want to make sure that this is locked, this is airtight for them to, before they actually submit their recommendation. Or it could be pressure and strategy. In high profile cases, repeated questioning like this could also serve as an investigative pressure. The more time someone is called in, the more likely inconsistencies or admission can emerge. So let's see what it is that they are doing, but any of those could be in play. Now, the one thing is that it could be that they have nothing. It could also be that, and that they are trying to get something, trying to make the connection before, as I've said, they forward it to the prosecutor's office. So the claim primarily is that Bang told investors there are no IPO plans and instructed investors to sell their shares. This is the main thing that he's being accused of. HYBE is saying, we said that there were no plans because there were no plans to go public in 2019. Now, in any kind of finance, because I came from the finance industry, as you know, the last job that I had, that was from in a investment industry. Um, One of the things that we always advise, not really advise, but one of the things that we always put forward to clients is to weigh their options and to make sure that they are very much in touch with the possibility that anything could crash, right? So before, if you're going to sign $1 million to an investment firm or a finance manager or something, read the agreement. And in that agreement, there's always a clause that states we are not responsible for any kind of losses you're going to suffer, even though that they are managing your money. So because it's the risk that you're going to have to take. And whenever something happens, we always tell, that's the first thing that we do. We tell people, we tell our investors, there's something happening in the social economic whatever, please make sure that you are informed. We're here to answer your questions, but you're going to have to make the decisions. It's always like that. So Bang Si-hyuk was just doing his dude, just he's making sure, he's just covering his CYA, covering your ass. So he's just telling them this could fall. I don't know what's going to happen. You know, there's no plan for an IPO. People are trying to tap out. We don't know what's going to happen. So if you're going to sell, go ahead and do so. We're not going to stop you. Okay. All right. So, why do regulators feel there was an IPO plan? Okay, this is based on the investigations already, not just what is being written by some people. Okay, so 2011. So remember, this is pre BTS, pre debut of BTS. 2011, the very first investor they had was LB Investments. So remember that time when high big hit at that time was going to crash. They were going to declare Chapter 11. LB was one of those that were consistently investing in the company. So they were there before anybody else. Okay. So, all right. So they're initial investors. 2018, after the entrance of BTS, Stick Investments invested money. So they came in as private investors. Both Stick and LB investors are private equity funds. So a PEF, that's what they do. They buy companies. And when you buy a company, if you're a private equity fund, your main focus is an exit, meaning you invest it after several years, you need to be able to sell your shares at a gain. Okay, that's your only concern. You're not concerned about technology or whatever. Just like, I just need my money back. That's what a private equity is. So they send out their dollars and expect those dollars to come back with company, but basically. Now 2018, with BTS booming, we know what's happening in 2018. LB investments, they sold their shares to stick investments, because that, so they first invested 2011. Okay. So they were like 2018, BTS is booming. Okay, we're getting a lot of our shares are actually way more now. It's worth way more. So they sold their shares to stick investments, and they gained 1900%. 1900% of gains is what they got. Okay, so 2018 they sold it, and that's how stick investments actually ended up with 12 to 13% of stocks. Okay. Um so Vice, now one of the founding members of HYBE, Vice President Choi Yu-jong, also said she wanted to sell, sorry. So she said she wanted to sell, and you can't blame her. It's about time that they cash in on whatever investments that they made. Now they needed to raise 50 billion won in order to buy her shares. Okay, someone needs to buy it, and someone needs to cough up 50 billion won. And that was the problem that they were having, because they couldn't find anybody to buy her shares. And so someone stepped in, and his name is Kim Jong Dong, and he was later on the became the chief investment officer of HYBE. But he is, at that time, he was one of those that were helping HYBE raise the funds all the way to before, like since 2011 he has been helping HYBE, but he wasn't an employee. So at that time, when they couldn't find anybody, he said, okay, I'll step in. He created his own fund and bought 23.4 billion off the 50 billion she wanted to sell. So the problem is that they were still short. Okay, so they were still short. Yes, so you must remember that BTS had military service looming at that time. Yes, and at that time, aside from the military service, TXT wasn't established yet. So people were worried, like, where are you going to get your money if BTS is going to enlist? So they were short 26.6 billion won, because they needed 50 billion won to buy her shares. And so Bang didn't have a choice. He personally bought her shares. So they couldn't find anybody else to do it. So he got it. He got it for himself. He said, okay, I'll just buy it. So the suspicion is that Bang Si-hyuk, so this is one of their many suspicions, that Bang Si-hyuk concealed the IPO plan from everybody, including Vice President Choi. And that's why no one was buying it. And that is why Vice President Choi also wanted to sell. And also, they feel that had he told everybody that there is an IPO plan, then even LB Investments might not have the intention to sell. Okay, that's their suspicion. Now, there were others who wanted to sell, and that included Legend Capital, also one of the investors that they have. And that is primarily because they were being pressured by their limited partners. So, a private equity fund gets their money from other investors, right? Individual investors. So, if you would remember, Suga invested in a private equity fund so that he can buy a sports team in the US, right? If you remember that. So Suga is actually a limited partner. So the limited partners, many limited partners of LP, they were pressuring Legend Capital. They were pressuring Legend Capital to buy out, to sell, because they wanted their money back already. Okay, so they wanted to get something. They wanted to get their gains. So they were being pressured. It was right around 2019. Okay, now Alpine Asset Management is also being pressured to sell their shares. Okay, buy LPs as well. Now, what they did was actually convert their investments into common stocks, because what they had was preferential stocks. They converted into common stocks. Okay. Now, um, there was a case in Korea. It's called Lime Asset Management. It used to be the biggest private equity fund in Korea. They collapsed because they found out that they were essentially running a Ponzi scheme. So remember that in a private equity fund, you're supposed to buy shares in companies, in different companies, and then eventually sell it for a gain, right? And so you rotate that money. You rotate that money so that when somebody, because for example, if I'm a private equity fund, I invested 100 million in, this is just an example, in NBA. And then my limited partners wanted out. I still don't want out. So they could be getting the money from somewhere else, right? Now, if apparently that's exactly what they are doing, it's just that it's a Ponzi scheme. So they will ask you to invest your money. Now, when you want to liquidate your money, they will get somebody else to invest and give you their money. So it's a Ponzi, like a Ponzi scheme. I'm sure that you know what a Ponzi scheme. So instead of actually selling the shares of the companies, they're getting it from other investors. So, because of this lesson, many limited partners have been scared of things like this. And so they were pressuring the PEF to sell already. Okay. And remember, as I said, this was 2018. BTS was going to enlist in the military and whatever. Okay. So, a mezzanine investment, because this was mentioned, this is any investment that is in between a debt and an equity, like convertible bonds, something that you can't automatically convert into cash, but also not a liability. Okay. All right. So I hope that's clear. Now, because there were a lot of people, a lot of investors wanted to sell, BTS, well, HYBE simply didn't have the money to cover all of them. They were like, everyone wants to sell. So, and I don't know where to get the money. That was their problem. To the point that they actually requested for a suspension of the redemption to 2020. So everybody wanted to redeem their shares in 2019. And Hype didn't have the money, couldn't find the money, and they said, okay, give us some leg room here. Just give us some runway so that we can find the money. Okay. So now what happened was the same guy, the initial guy that set up the funds, and then also internally, so they were like discussing, is there like a possibility for an IPO? But because of the financial condition at that time, they didn't have that money. So they told people, as of now, is not a good time for us to do an IPO because the valuation of the company is not that good. So HYBE applied for a designed audit after Legend Capitals did it. So remember, many of the LPs, the limited partners of Legend Capital, wanted to sell their shares. Now, Legend Capital told HYBE, can you please do a designated audit so that we can prove that you can do an IPO? So that's what they did. That's what HYBE did. Upon the request of LP, they asked for a designated audit. Usually, a designated audit happens when there is an IPO preparation. Usually. But this time it was requested by Legend Capital. All right. So even after the designated audit, the LPs, the limited partners, were still pressuring Legend to sell. And so they did. They sold their shares. So Easton Fund 2, remember they first set it up initially to buy the shares of the vice president. Now they set up another fund, and bought 8.7 stake from LB, Legend, and Alpha Route. So they couldn't find anybody. Now, in this deal, this is where Bang Si-hyuk signed a deal with the PEF to guarantee that if they fail to do an IPO in 3 years, then Bang Si-hyuk himself will be guaranteeing the return of their investment plus 7% interest. So this is where the guarantee took place. If, however, the IPO succeeds, then Bang gets 30% of the sale proceeds. All right. So this is the main contention. This is the loophole, and this is where everyone has been going gaga about because people keep on misinterpreting what happened. It was Bang Shiyuk who made a personal deal with with Easton. It wasn't Hybe, it was him. He was saying, I'm going to pay you from my own pocket. If we fail an IPO in the next 3 years, I will buy your shares plus 7% interest. Okay. Now, because it is a private deal between Bang Shiyuk and Easton, you do not have to disclose it publicly. If it had been Hybe and Easton, it would have been required to be disclosed. So May 2020, they succeeded in their IPO. And sorry, they submitted their preliminary IPO review, and it looked good. By August of 2020, BTS got their shares. So right around this time, Bang Shiyu kind of already realized that things are looking great. It looks like we are going to get approved. Here is your IPO. Here is your shares. So he gave each member 400, sorry, he gave all seven members 478,695,000 shares. And that is 68,385 per member. All right. So when he gave them the IPO, this is from his own shares. He didn't take it from anybody else. So he gave some of his shares to BTS members. So when he gave it to them, each member had about 7.9 US dollars. Okay. Now on the IPO date itself, that doubled. Okay. So in the personal guarantee that he did, that he had with Easton, that was not in Hybe's IPO prospectus because he didn't have to. According to their regulation, he did not have to disclose that because it was a private investment. But it was in the IM, the investment memorandum of Easton. So if Bang had guaranteed repayment as Hybe, it would count as a corporate debt. But because it was private, he didn't have to disclose. So he did not disclose. Okay. And that's what they are now saying. So this is what they are accusing him of, that he manipulated it so that he does not have to pay people. Okay, so the people will sell early and lose, and he will gain everything. Now on IPO date, Big Hit listed on Kospi. IPO price opened at 135 and it closed at 270 on the day itself. So that means the $7.9 million of BTS members doubled. So it became 15.8 or something. Now it hit all the way to 400. It hit 400. And 400 is when Stick Capital sold their shares. So, and because they hold a lot, that's when it crashed. It crashed back to about 220 or something. Now, because in investing in stocks, I don't know if you're aware of this, but in investments, there's what we call FOMO. This is what we tell investors never to have. And that is when you see a stock going up, you get excited and you don't want to miss out. It's the fear of missing out. You don't want to miss out. And so you buy. The tendency is that you buy at its peak. So we're like, don't do that. Don't just buy because it's going up. Look at the fundamentals of the company and buy when and keep it there because eventually it's going to get to that again. So now these people are saying, the police are saying that the retail investors are the biggest losers. That's number one. Second, that LB Investments, who gained 1900%, and the vice president and a few others, including Legend Capital, who was getting pressured by their limited partners, may not have sold their shares had he been open about the fact that he was going to do an IPO. And Hybe is saying we didn't have plans on doing an IPO in 2019. That's why we said we didn't have plans in doing an IPO in 2019. And that was confirmed by Min Hee-jin. She confirmed it because she said that Bang Shiyuk herself told her they were not gonna do an IPO, and that was the truth. Now it's just that now it's I think the biggest question here is whether or not they're going to punish him for not following a regulation that wasn't there, right? Because remember that Bang Shiyuk's deal with Easton Private Equity Fund was a private thing. It was between Bang Shiyuk and Easton, not HYBE and Easton. And according to their regulation, he didn't have to disclose it. So he didn't. How many times do they have to say there was no IPO plans in 2019? Um, well, they're not buying it because usually a lot of people misunderstand this, and I'm sure because the department that's investigating this is not like the criminal investigation unit of the police, right? These are actually specializing in finance crimes. And so usually when you get investments like PEF or private equity funds, there's an intention to go public. Not always, but people always assume that if you have an investor like that, your intention is to go public. Not necessarily. You could just be getting an investors just so you can expand or something. And also PEF don't always have to go public in order to make their gains. Like what LB investments did, they invested early. When their shares were way up, they sold, and beat big hit at that time wasn't public yet. So yeah. So the main thing, I hope that you're understanding everything that I'm saying. So if there's something that's not clear, ask me. So that is the how do we know more about the details that the police next door? Um so many of these financial documents are actually public. Like for example, the IPO document is actually public. It's open to everybody. You don't have to invest in order to get a hold of that. Like for me, I can get an IP the investors document of Coca-Cola or whatever. It's available out there. It's a public document. There are also filings that are actually public as well, like the investors memorandum, the IM, what they call the IM of PEF, of the private equity funds. Those are public as well. And so if you know where to find it, and a lot of other publications actually do, you can get hold of that. And so from there, they actually can track what happened. You see, like, oh, they went, somebody bought this at this time and whatever. So so you just need to find like the right publications that are actually reporting the facts and not sensationalizing this. And second is that a lot of the things that you find on like English based Korean publications, meaning, sorry, American based Korean publications, meaning those that are based in the US but are reporting on what's happening in Korean entertainment, most of them are manipulated in order to paint someone or something consistent with the narrative that they want to sell. So if they want it to be verse against Bang Shiyuk, then they will just delete some things and report so that it looks like it's in favor of the narrative that they want to sell. The same thing is true if it is the other way around. If you are favoring Bang Shiyuk, then you can delete some things in order to sell a narrative that's consistent with what you want to sell. Okay. How far into 2020 did the IPO come to pass? Maybe it's the timing that makes them still question him. So, 29, the first public sign of an IPO was October of 2019, but that's a little questionable because it was Legend Capital who requested that from Bang Shiyuk. So they are one of the private equity funds investing, and they were getting pressured by their limited partners to sell, and they didn't want to sell. And so in order to sort of appease their limited partners, they asked Bang Shiyuk to do uh, a designated audit for their company to be audited. And usually that's the first thing that you do when you're going to go public. But Bang Shiyuk and HYBE is saying, we didn't do that by ourselves. It was requested by our partner. We didn't do that ourselves. According to their internal external assessments, they're not in a good place to do an IPO, primarily because they were losing money. A lot of the investors wanted to sell, right? So they're losing money. They were like, we're not in a good position to sell right now. But they did it for one of their investors. Now, May 2020 is when they submitted their IPO request. So you fill up a form, you prepare. So probably a month, 2, 3 months before that, they were gathering documents or whatever. And then they filed May of 2020. August of 2020, BTS got their shares. And then October is when they went public. Um, no investor has claimed fraud. This investigation is not fueled by that. It's not clear who initiated this. It's not clear who initiated and who's complaining. And I mean, I doubt it's LB Investments. You already gained that's more than 1,500%. What else do you want? Right? So, and nobody lost money. Anywhere, everyone who invested gained between 60% to 1,900%. So, it could be could be anybody. Um, so the investigation is them trying to find the evidence they don't have. They know that the rule can't be applied when it didn't exist. Without evidence, there is no case. Correct. Because everyone kind of already agrees that the rule that you need to disclose even private agreements with PEFs, that came after this case. So you can't apply it to this case. So the only thing that they need to find now for them to have a case is for the malice of not disclosing the intention to go public. That's the only thing that they may have. They need to prove that he willingly withheld that information. And HYBE is saying that we didn't withhold anything because we didn't have the intention. That's it. Dynamite dropped at the end of August 2020. A scandal involving Coachella. It's the shaman hadn't invested her prayers. Okay, it's Mama Roach. If there is an actual hearing, I'll wait until all is over with Bang Si-hyuk. Yeah. It's just a good lesson in like how business is done. A lot of their investment, the good thing about all of this is that a lot of their financial regulations are actually being copied from the US. So yeah, there have been other cases like this where I think a Samsung executive was already a Samsung founder or owner or something, was indicted and was actually fined. He got a suspended jail sentence. So I think there were two cases like this, but they're looking for one for this current president who's just hungry for any kind of big fish. Min did not want the company to go public. She was upset that the IPO occurred. What scandal is going on with Coachella? And Mama Roach helped, of all people. Yeah. I think you just, for this case, because she's not really involved in this. I mean, she didn't even have the money to buy her own shares. Remember, Bang Si-hyuk actually lent her 14 million or 13 million, or whatever. Bang Si-hyuk lent her money. So she actually doesn't have like a skin in the game. Like what kind of money are you going to be using to buy your shares? You had to borrow from Bang Si-hyuk. So, but she's saying that maybe she could have structured her contract a different way had she known that there was going to be an IPO. Everyone alert VNJK to meet us at hand to look for the laptop sham. Okay, so that's the case. Do you have any other question before I go on to the next topic? Considering she's trying to insert herself into the story, makes me even more suspicious. You know, she just needs the media space. Did the new press change CMA rules to make it seem Bang Si-hyuk committed a crime? Yes, after. So he was already investigated about this. Remember the first time. That's where all this guarantee, him guaranteeing the contract and all came about. So they already ruled, yeah, he didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't in our rule for him to disclose. We don't essentially we weren't requiring him to disclose what we're telling him he didn't disclose, so he didn't commit a crime. After that, they changed the rules.